Okay, so today I'm going to show you all how to run through a Gantt chart in, not in Tableau, I've already done that, in R. So before we get started, we're going to go ahead and make sure we have these two packages installed. Plotly is a package similar to, now the name has left me, the other plotting software we've been using, but it has some different, some ggplot, excuse me. It has some different things that it can do. And then our color brewer, instead of using the other color method that we've been using for different backgrounds and plots, we're going to use this R color brewer. So we'll go ahead and download those. I have this up here to clear my workspace. I'll go ahead and do that. That just allows us to kind of clear like this environment up here. So every once in a while I'll do that so that nothing gets, it's no sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say relics, but it's not relics. Like, so nothing gets left behind from previous attempts that could, give me errors now. Artifacts, that's the word I was looking for. So I'll go ahead and I'll read in my data. Here, it's this Gantt chart version 5. It looks like this, just so you have, let me get rid of this. It looks like this, just so you have some idea. We'll talk through this. So I went ahead and have each task numbered. So for simplicity for my chart, then I have the tasks themselves, who's responsible for them, what the start date is, or is anticipated, what the projected duration, how many hours we're going to spend on it, as well as the stage of the project, first stage, second stage, and third stage, what deliverables will be given to the client, is the task complete as of right now, and when the actual date it started was, and then we have the actual duration. And then we have some, so which tasks are completed. 1 is yes, and 0 is no. So underway, there's 1 that is, and then yet to begin, there's 1. And then it'll create these color codes for us with that new color brewer software or program that we put in here. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'll talk you through it, and then we'll run it and kind of see what features it has. So the first thing we want to do is we want to convert these dates to dates that we can use. So I have my array of the data set. I have start date, which is the variable that I'm interested in. And we're pushing into that this kind of conversion of date format, and this is the format we want to use with month and day. So we went ahead and converted that, and as you can see here, it's apparent that it worked here. Then we have the project name or the title of the chart, and they call that client. I'm assuming because at some point, you might have one of these timeline type Gantt charts for each client. So if you did that, you might have each client name at the top. We're going to go ahead and call ours R&R timeline. So then we want to choose the colors. Obviously, I'm not too worried about those kinds of things. I left them as is, but I mean, you could change them to any other types of colors. But we're going to push into this colors, the RG Brewer unique type of array. We're going to use 3 different colors because later we're going to base it on the stage. So we want to have, there are 3 stages, so we want to have 3 colors. And then we'll push into Gantt chart color, this factor with color labels. So then we're going to go ahead and initialize the empty plot, which is this pushing into P. So P is what our plot is, and as I'm sure Stephen is laughing right now, sometimes I forget to run the whole plot. So this is a very important step for me. P is the plot, so if I want to push things into it, then I need to be able to run it at the end. And then we'll look and see, okay, so each task, so if you remember in our chart up here, we have 6 tasks. Each task is its own trace, and each trace is like a thick line plot, so, just like we have bar charts or something like that, it kind of resembles one over here, and so you can see how they can plot it that way. And The x-axis ticks are handled kind of automatically based on the data that you have. But they begin based on the start date you give, and then their length is based on the duration of time you spend on each task. And that'll be important in a few minutes when we get into this syntax. So we're going to do this loop here. And what that allows us to do is kind of, create a looping of, I hate to say iterations of, but essentially iterations of certain text that we need. So for I and 1, so they use I for the, if you notice it's in here a lot, it's the value for each task. So for each task in this row, in each row, we're going to do all of these things to Gantt chart version 5. Since we're going to push this into P, we're going to add a trace for P. From here, we're going to put in our Gantt chart where, our array is the start date is what's emphasized. So if you notice, just like we talked about previously, we're going to do start date and then start date plus the projected duration. So the start date is what our x-axis will be, kind of, and then the length of the line is the start date plus the duration, like I just noticed. And then the y is I because it's based on these tasks. Remember, each task is an I. The mode, we want it to be a line. We want it to have color. The width is 40. If you notice, I got some big old fat lines on here. You can change it back to 20 and get it skinny if you want. I kind of like being able to see it. And I'll expand this later and we'll talk through it. But I'd rather you guys be able to see this right now. We don't want there to be a legend, so we put show legend as false because there's not a whole lot of room left for it, especially when we have this text box down here that I'll get to describing in a little bit. And then we want the hover info to be text. So if you notice, every time I try and show you something on here, text pops up. And so we're going to go ahead and jump right into how do we create that custom text? How do we create it so that it, changes text based on which stage we're on, which task we're on. So we want to, we just created this hover info text. So for the text, we want it to kind of separate into, or we want to paste into it all of the different tasks that we have. So, or not all, excuse me, all of the different information that we have. So if you notice here, we have, what's the task, who's the responsible party. We want all that to be able to show up when I roll over one of these and can say, okay, I can see all of this information. So we went through and created a label, which are these green words for each one. And I mean, it's pretty much the same label as I had on the header on the Excel spreadsheet anyway. But, if you had like some shortened variable names, this might be helpful. So I went ahead and put a colon and a space after it so that when it autofills with this stage of project I, so the thing that's in that stage of the project's field, when it inserts that, there's already a space in between it. And so that's what I did for all of these. If you notice, I did, it calls the data set and then it calls the variable. And then depending on what level on the y-axis or what task we're jumping into, it'll pull the appropriate information from that column. So we did that for stage, duration, deliverable given. I did want to note here, just like I added a space, a colon and a space, so that, this information will be pumped into there. I also added hours to the end because it's just a single number in projected duration. So like, on the spreadsheet it says 10, but I wanted to say 10 hours. So if you notice on here, it says projected duration 20 hours for that specific task, so that it makes more sense for a client or for interpretation. So I did that. So we did that for all of these different ones. None of the rest of them really needed a label. One of the interesting ones though is this complete task variable that I have. And essentially, Stephen asked us to look into how many tasks are completed, and if they're completed, can we give him some information on them, like when they actually started, not when we anticipated, and when they actually, or how long they actually were, not what we anticipated. So in order for us to do that, we used a conditional array, this if-else statement that you see these orange letters here, and those are kind of used to help programs make decisions on, like in this one scenario of the data, it's yes, and in this other scenario, it's no. Well, is there, there's got to be a way for us to, show different things in different circumstances. And so this is the way that it does that. So we have complete task as our label. We say if the Gantt chart variable complete task that's being inserted is yes, and I'm going to pause here because you notice there's these two equal signs. And the research that I did on this is, so, a single equal sign, if you notice we don't use it a ton because, in some instances it's able to replace the assignment operator, like the what you see up here, this arrow here. Sometimes the equal sign can replace that, but sometimes it's used as a separator key. So, we don't necessarily like using it all the time because in certain circumstances it doesn't apply. So we use that arrow most of the time. But the double equal sign is used for equality testing. So if you think about it like that, so if the response is yes, and if we look over at our chart, I have literally written yes or no. So if this field is yes, then this next item is going to happen. So if Gantt chart complete task for that row is yes, then we're going to paste some text in there. And it's going to be the complete task text. And then in addition to that, we're going to add the actual start date and actual duration. And it's the same type of array here. Here's our label of what it's going to say. Here's the data set it's coming from. Here is the variable it's coming from, and it's going to pump in that that row specifically. And then just like I did up here for duration, I want to add hours to the end of it. So if you notice when we come over here, so this is a complete task. You see the third from the bottom, complete task. Actual start date, it tells you, and then actual duration, it tells you 16 hours. So it added the hours to it for us. And so that's how we're able to add a conditional statement. If you notice at the end, so it's kind of like a if-then statement. So if-else, we're just going to put the complete task in there. We won't even include these actual start dates and actual duration. So if you notice over here, I may have to pull it out. Hang on just a second. Over here on one of these that is not completed, let me see, that one's not completed. So complete task, no. So if you notice there's nothing underneath it, there's no actual start date, there's no actual duration. So that successfully did what we wanted it to do. Then we add this evaluate equals t. It's said that it's needed to avoid lazy loading, and from what I've read, it seems like this lazy loading is essentially that there's not enough space to hold all of the information at one time into your local environment. And so instead, a lot of times they'll store it elsewhere. Well, when we're using interactive charts like this, it's really hard to have to wait to retrieve information when we want it to pop up immediately. So this helps us to, in some way it's a command that lets them know that it needs to be retrieving this information pretty readily. So then we want to add information to the plot to make it more presentable. So into P we'll push some layout information. We're going to work on the axis and the grid lines and their tick labels and that kind of thing. So for our x-axis, we want to show that we don't want to show a grid. That's why it's false. The tick font is this color, which is essentially the same color as the background, if you notice. So there's not really a tick on it. And then we can add a label, completion calendar for the x-axis. Y-axis, show grid is false. We don't want to show it, just like before. Same thing with the color, tick mode, array. The tick values are one for each row. So in the y-axis, if you notice, it's task 6, task 5, not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that it automatically generates. It pulled those from the row itself. And it says here that it's unique based on task number. So that's where that came from. And then here's the label we're going to use, task number. This is the distance it is, or its location, I guess. So then we're going to go in and add some annotations. And that's how, we add these tasks completed underway. These little annotations down here, instead of having a legend, we're going to have these. And they're able to kind of help us describe things or keep a reference point if we need it. So here we have this list, X reference, paper, Y reference, paper. And I was really confused about what they mean by paper, but apparently it's part of the layout annotations, and it sets the annotations coordinate, whether it's the x-axis or the y-axis, and it can be set to like other values, but if it's set to paper, it refers to the distance from the left side of the plotting area. So it kind of uses itself as a reference point. So that's why it says paper. And then it's got some coordinates as to where it's going to land this box, or not really box, but this, bit of text. And then we want to paste into that text area our labels, which is tasks completed, tasks underway, and tasks yet to begin. And if you notice, I have this /n at the front of these two. I wanted these to be, so initially these were all on one line with no period or space or anything, and I wanted them to kind of be stacked on top of each other so that they could be seen really easily and simply. So this essentially entered them down a row. So I have those just like before. On my labels I have a colon and a space. And then I wanted to use, so since we're looking to get a fraction here, we want to say how many tasks are completed out of how many tasks. So we take the sum of the number of tasks completed. In my Excel spreadsheet, they are valued at 1 or 0, whether or not they're completed. So obviously there's a 1 if that one task is completed. So we take the sum of that, and then we divide it, which is this here, by the number of rows that there are. So because there are 6 rows, they equate 6 tasks. So that it automatically divides them by 6. And that way, it's always like, say we add another task, this would automatically repopulate. So we can keep moving with this. So if you notice, we have tasks completed, tasks underway, tasks yet to begin, and at the end I've added a space and the word tasks, so that, let me pull this out a little bit so that I can show you a little better. So here you can see it's pretty neat and tidy. Tasks completed, 4 out of 6 tasks, and it should update if we were to add data to the spreadsheet. And then we make sure we close all of our parentheses because R is a little bit temperamental. Then we want a font color, which obviously I don't care anything about. There's a size, you can change it. This AX and AY is used as, when there's more than one X and Y, it's kind of used as a location coordinate, but they're at 0. And it's aligned to the left, if you notice. It's not aligned to the right side of the little area that we've put it in. Then we want to add the client name and the title on top. So just like we did before, we're going to use this X reference paper. So we use a whole other, so just like we did here, it's basically like I want to insert this little text box. And so I'm going to do that here. And I want it to be based on the distance, from the left side of the plotting area. It's kind of like their default, if you will. And I can change that. I wanted it to be anchored to the left, so it doesn't look like it right now, but if I pull this out, the title is more to the left. Then we want to paste in there Gantt chart, client. So we want it to say Gantt chart, as a label, and then it will change based on what the client is, or remember, in our case, up here at the top, that is R&R timeline. That's our title. So we want to click that in there. And then, the font color, size, font type or family, whether or not we want to move it, and then we want it aligned to the left, just like the other one. And then just area colors and axis colors. I really don't care too much about it. And then let's run it. So let's go ahead, highlight everything except those we've already read in the data, so we don't necessarily need that. Let's go ahead and run it. And there's our new plot. Well, of course this happens. Of course this happens. Let me, you know what? I didn't clear my workspace. I bet that has something to do with it. Let me clear that, clear this. We're going to run everything. I think I didn't highlight something. Up here. Okay, hallelujah. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pull this out into a big window so you can see it. And we'll kind of talk through it. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our left-oriented label. We have our tasks over here, but they're all oriented to the left of this little area. We have our dates and our tasks. If we go to any one of these, we can see, it's kind of testy every once in a while. So we can see that it's the task, the stage, and then from there we have the duration, what's the deliverable, who's responsible for it, when does it start, is it completed, and since, remember we had that conditional formatting, since it's completed, what is the actual start date and the duration. So you could compare those. So like we projected it to be 10 hours and it ended up being 15. And then, we have here, we have stage 2, which, is yellow as opposed to green, which was stage 1. This was a completed task. So, and then we could go here. You have to like click on weird areas. Okay, so this is not a completed task, so if you notice we don't have the actual date or duration on there, but all the rest of the pertinent information is available. So I hope this was helpful. See you in